Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. What if I told you that you could take an image just like this, changing only one setting in your camera? Does that sound good to you? Well, continue watching this video and I will show you how to use this setting to take amazing photos. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're going to talk about your camera's shutter speed. First, you got to figure out what shutter speed is. So shutter speed is the amount of time that the image sensor on your camera records the image for. So here are a couple quick videos of a camera and its shutter opening and closing to take a picture. One is from a little bit older of a camera and one is from a newer DSLR. These shutter actions can be set to happen very quickly within a fraction of a second or as long as 30 minutes or longer. So shutter speed is generally referred to in seconds or fractions of seconds. For example, 1/8,000th of a second or 1/2 of a second, things like that. So why do you need to understand shutter speed and what do you need to use it for? So shutter speed can change the amount of motion in your image. So some images you'll want a lot of motion blur, and we'll talk about those later, but some images you want to freeze and you don't want any movement at all. So now you're probably asking, well, what am I supposed to set my shutter speed to? So if you want to freeze a subject, a rule of thumb is that you can use your lens focal length to determine what your shutter speed should be set to. For example, if I'm using a 50mm lens for my camera, 1/50th of a second should be the lowest shutter speed I can go without having any motion blur in my image. Remember, this is not the only factor that considers into this. There are other factors such as the lighting conditions and how fast your subject is moving or if it's stationary. Okay, so when do we want to use motion blur and when do we want motion blur removed from our images? Motion blur can create some very creative effects. However, there are some times when you don't want any motion blur and you want to freeze a subject in that fraction of a second. So for example, if you wanted to capture a waterfall with the moving water just like this, you would use a lower shutter speed so that you could capture all the motion of that waterfall. The same can be used to capture a moving vehicle or light trails and things like that. However, if you're taking a picture of, say, a child running around or a dog running and jumping or playing around, you want to freeze as much of that motion as possible so that you can get the clearest image. So this is when you would use a higher shutter speed, such as 1/4000th of a second or even higher. Here are two separate photos I took of our dog running at me while he was trying to get treats from me. So one is at 1/50th of a second, and you can see in this photo how much motion blur there is. So the other photo is taken at 1/4000th of a second, and you can see how it freezes the dog mid-air, and there's so much more detail in that image than the previous one that showed a blurry dog image in the right-hand side. Okay, this doesn't mean that you can't use a slow shutter speed to create cool effects and do things with your photography that other people haven't seen before. Remember that photography is about creating art and invoking a feeling in somebody. So there's many different ways to go about that with your photography. Some ways to use a slower shutter speed to your advantage are like light painting, light trail photos where you have cars driving around on the freeway, and even longer shutter speed settings to get like Milky Way and star motion shots. Okay, some things to keep in mind when you're using shutter speed. Remember that the slower your shutter opens and closes, the more light that's going to be let into your sensor. So you need to account for that with either your aperture or your ISO setting. So we're going to cover ISO in my next video so that you can put our previous video about aperture, this one about shutter speed, and that one about ISO together to create some amazing portraits and photographs. Okay, another tip is that for low light or nighttime photography, you're going to want a lower shutter speed. You're gonna want that shutter to be open longer so you can get more light in the sensor. Okay, also keep in mind that if, say you're shooting indoors and there's not a lot of sunlight, and you want to capture a child running around or something at a birthday party or people hanging around at your house or a party, but there's not a lot of light, and you want to use, say, 1/2000th of a second for your shutter speed, you're going to have to adjust your other settings to compensate for the amount of light that's not getting to your sensor. Okay, so when you're using your camera, make sure you get out there and test different settings. Try different shutter speeds out and explore what you can do with your photography. That's what these videos are all about, is for you to learn what to do with your camera and to create your own version of every photograph that you take. Okay, so if you're using your shutter speed and you haven't figured out how to use shutter speed along with aperture, I've linked a video below that we cover how to use the manual mode on your camera to adjust shutter speed and your aperture to get the best images possible. So make sure you check out that video. All right, well, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. If you like what you saw and you want to learn some more, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this and learn more about how to enhance your photography. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.